I started baking at 4 a.m., like I'd done every year since Tyson turned 1. This year, I wasn't sure if my hands could hold the piping bag steady, but I tried. I wanted it to be perfect. Not for recognition, not for praise, just to be included. If you've ever given everything and still felt invisible, you'll understand why this isn't just a cake. It's the beginning of a revenge story, but not the kind you're thinking of. My name's Elaine Trenton. I'm 73 years old. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Syracuse, New York, surrounded by a quiet street full of retirees and empty lawns. I used to have a big house, a 2-story colonial with lilac bushes and a backyard my late husband planted himself. We raised our son Marcus there. After Harold passed, I sold that house. The memories were too loud, the rooms too quiet. And truthfully, I wanted to be closer to Marcus and his family. He and his wife had just moved into a gated community near Rochester. Big open kitchen, heated floors, luxury everything. Marcus said they could use a hand with Tyson, my only grandchild. I told him I'd help any way I could. That's what mothers do. That's what grandmothers live for. I've been bringing over groceries, picking Tyson up from school, and baking birthday cakes every single year. I've also been quietly transferring money, monthly support, they call it. Unofficially, I helped them with their down payment. Nobody asked. I offered, because it felt good to matter. This year, Tyson was turning 6, and like every year, I planned to make his birthday cake. He was in love with dinosaurs, especially the Ankylosaurus. We'd sat together last month with his picture book, and he'd pointed it out like it was a secret only we shared. "That one, Grandma. I want that one on my cake." So I practiced. My hands aren't what they used to be. The arthritis makes them slow, and some mornings the joints feel like they've locked up overnight. But I practiced anyway. I even ordered a custom mold for the tail. By 7:30 that morning, I had the cake cooled, layered, and frosted. A double-tiered chocolate cake with green buttercream vines and little fondant dinosaurs circling the edges. I'd even added a tiny volcano in the center that could hold a single sparkler candle. I placed the whole thing into a cake box, covered it in ice packs, and gently lowered it into the back seat of my Buick. The drive to Marcus's house takes about 40 minutes. Enough time to let old thoughts creep in. I wondered if they'd made the guest list yet. I hadn't received a printed invitation, just a text from Marcus. "Party starts at 2. Backyard. Bring the cake if you're still making it." Still making it. It struck me as odd, as if my role were optional, as if my place could be replaced by a bakery order if I happened to forget. But I shook it off. I always do. When I arrived, the house looked like a magazine spread. A bounce house inflated over the grass, dinosaur-themed tableware perfectly arranged. Tyson's mom, Lacey, stood directing the rental crew like a wedding planner. She barely noticed me. Just a quick, "Oh, hi, Elaine. Kitchen's through there," before she went back to giving instructions about balloon placement. Marcus wasn't outside yet, so I made my way through the French doors into the kitchen. I laid the cake gently on the marble counter, removed the lid carefully, and smiled. It looked joyful, a child's kind of magic. Not perfect, but full of love. That's when I saw the other cake. White box, silver lettering from a fancy bakery in downtown Rochester, the kind that charges $500 for custom fondant work. A second cake, a backup. I didn't touch it. Just stood there for a minute staring at both cakes side by side. Mine slightly crooked, theirs pristine. I didn't say anything when Marcus came in. I didn't say anything when Lacey walked by again and gave mine a tight-lipped smile and said, "Very sweet. Homemade things are charming." I just nodded. Later, I asked Marcus where I should set mine during the party. He hesitated. "Maybe on the side table? Lacey's cake will be the centerpiece for photos." Photos? Of course. They'd use the bakery cake for the pictures, for the Instagram posts, for the memory books. Mine was just for the dessert table. That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not with a scream, but quietly, like a door closing that I hadn't realized was open. And in that stillness, I heard it. "You're just helping. You're not family." He didn't say it out loud, but he didn't have to. It was in the way he looked through me, in the way he gently steered me out of the frame when guests arrived. It was in the way no one asked if I wanted to light the candle with Tyson or if I could sit beside him during the gift opening. I was part of the help, a background character. It's strange, the moment you realize you've become invisible in a story you thought you helped write. I didn't cry. I smiled through the party. I took photos of Tyson with his friends, cleaned up discarded napkins, held the baby of one of Lacey's friends while she got a drink. Everyone thanked me, politely. But no one saw me. And that night, I went home with half a cake still in the box, unsliced, untouched. I placed it on the kitchen counter, sat down in the quiet, and whispered to no one. Next year, I won't be baking. Because next year, I wouldn't be waiting to be invited. I didn't tell anyone about what happened at the birthday party, not my neighbor Margaret from down the hall, not my friend Irene from book club, not even Eleanor, who's been my closest friend since we were both 23 and trying to keep our babies quiet during Sunday service. I just carried it, quietly. And I think that's something only people like us understand. You don't cause a scene, you don't make a fuss. You keep your head high, and you go home with a smile stitched on like your Sunday best, even if your chest feels hollow and your cake box is still full. A few days after the party, Marcus called me, the kind of call where he cleared his throat more than he spoke. "Hey, Mom," he started. "I've been meaning to reach out. Just wanted to say thanks again for the cake. Tyson really loved the little tail on the dinosaur. He mentioned it during bedtime." That made me smile. Just a little. "He's such a sweet boy," I said. There was a pause, then he added, "Listen, there's actually something else I wanted to bring up." That phrase, something else, it always means trouble, doesn't it? "I was talking with Lacey," he continued, "and we've been trying to streamline our finances a bit." I stayed quiet. "You know, with interest rates going up and Tyson's private school tuition coming up next year, things are tighter than expected." I knew what was coming. You can feel these things as a mother. They don't even need to say it directly anymore. "We were wondering," he finally said, "if instead of the credit card setup, you'd be willing to just do a direct transfer each month, like $10,000. That way, it's simpler for everyone." I held the phone to my ear like it had grown teeth. 10,000? I repeated. "Yeah, I mean, it sounds big when you say it like that, but it's really just for Tyson's expenses, you know? And emergencies. It just feels awkward having the card tied to your account, like we're being watched." I didn't say anything for a moment. Watched? That card was meant to help. It wasn't a leash. It wasn't a trap. It was love. Extended in plastic form with my name on the bill every month. "I see," I said softly. And that's when it happened. He added, carefully, gently, like he didn't want me to notice the blade sliding in. "We just don't want you to feel like you're part of everything if it's becoming overwhelming. You've done so much, but maybe it's time to step back a little. Just be grandma when it matters. When it matters." So I guess all the mornings I made Tyson's lunch, all the afternoons I sat in carpool pickup, all the money I slipped under the rug without anyone asking, that didn't count. It wasn't what matters. I could feel the blood rush to my ears. I told him I'd think about it, that I'd call him back, and when I hung up, I just sat there for a long time, staring at the stack of envelopes on my kitchen table. One of them was from my investment manager. Another was a catalog for winter coats. Another had a photo of Tyson on the cover, his school fundraiser brochure. I'd bought $200 worth of raffle tickets. None of it mattered. They wanted me to step back now. If you're still watching this, maybe you've been there too, where you've given so much for so long that your presence is taken for granted, or worse, politely declined. If you've ever heard the phrase, "We've got it from here," when all you wanted was to stay close, you're not alone. And if you've ever had to pretend you were okay with it, I see you. I really see you. A few days later, I got my answer without even having to call back. Marcus emailed me a new draft budget for how they'd use the money. It included line items like family wellness, appearance upgrades, and a $1,500 digital presence refresh for Lacey's Instagram brand. Nothing about Tyson's school. Nothing about books or medical bills or clothes for winter. I printed out the email, read it twice, and then opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. Click, cancel authorized user. Click, request new card number. Click, freeze autopay. It took less than 10 minutes to undo what I'd spent years building. And then I sat in silence. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. It was worse than that. I felt erased. Not like someone who'd been rejected, like someone who had never been there in the first place. The thing about being erased is it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in stages. First, they stop replying to text as quickly. Then the invitations start to come with less warmth. And eventually, they stop coming at all. I knew something had shifted when I didn't get a single call that week. Not even from Tyson. Not even a photo. That Wednesday, I showed up to his school like I had every week for the past year to pick him up for our little tradition. Juice boxes and puzzle time at my apartment. But the office secretary looked up at me with a tight smile. "Oh, Mrs. Trenton, I'm so sorry. Tyson's mom picked him up today. They must have forgotten to let you know." I stood there in the school hallway, clutching the pickup pass in my hand like it meant something, like I still belonged. I walked back to my car with a kind of numbness I hadn't felt in a long time. Not even when Harold died. That grief was sharp and violent. This was slow, like water freezing around your ankles. You don't notice it until you can't move anymore. That evening, I didn't call Marcus. I didn't call Lacey. I just sat in my armchair and listened to the quiet. A week passed, then 2. Then came the blow I didn't see coming. I was sipping my coffee one morning, scrolling through my phone, mostly weather updates and church bulletins, when a photo popped up in my feed. Tyson's birthday, a second party, a new cake, same dinosaur theme, same green color palette I'd used. But this one was bigger, professionally made, a full Jurassic landscape complete with a fondant volcano and edible moss. The caption read, "So grateful for everyone who helped raise this amazing boy into who he is today. Family means everything." And just below it, tagged in the photo, Lacey's parents, a few friends, Marcus, no mention of me, no photos of me, no thank you, not even a hint. I stared at the screen until my coffee went cold. My eyes stung, but the tears didn't come, not right away. I think my heart was too confused to cry. There was Tyson, wearing the same little khaki outfit I'd bought him last fall, standing next to that new cake, smiling, not a trace of me anywhere. That was when I realized I hadn't been left out. I had been replaced. They'd thrown a second party without telling me. After all the years, after the baking, the babysitting, the financial help, the nights I spent in their guest room when Tyson had the flu and Lacey couldn't handle the mess. They hadn't just uninvited me. They had rewritten the story so I was never part of it. And maybe this sounds silly, but I printed out that photo. I printed it and taped it into the back page of my photo album. I labeled it in pen, Tyson's 6th birthday, the first one I didn't exist. That's when it finally hit me. All these years, I had poured myself into this family, into Marcus, into keeping close, even when they grew cold. I had baked and smiled and paid and loved, and now I was being told gently and politely and publicly, you were never really needed. And what haunted me most wasn't the cruelty. It was how effortless it seemed for them. They didn't even hesitate. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to be a mother to a child who could erase me from a memory as easily as deleting a file. I spent the next few days moving around my apartment like a ghost. The walls felt closer than usual. The phone didn't ring. My neighbors passed in the hallway with gentle nods. I tried to read, to watch the news, to write in my journal, but the hurt sat so heavy in my chest, it made everything else feel small. And one night, maybe the 3rd since I saw that photo, I sat on the edge of my bed and finally asked the question I'd been too afraid to face. If I don't matter to them anymore, what do I do with all this love I still have? Because that's the worst part, isn't it? You don't just stop loving them, even when they make you feel invisible, even when they rewrite your role in the family story as a side character, Even when they pretend you never baked that cake, or held that fevered child, or paid those bills, the love doesn't go away. It just floats, untethered, looking for a place to land. And that's where I was, standing in the quiet of my own life, holding a kind of grief that didn't have a name. If you've ever felt erased by someone you raised, someone you poured yourself into, I want you to know I'm thinking of you right now. This kind of pain isn't loud, it's not dramatic, but it's real, and it lingers. If you feel it too, you're not weak, you're just human. I'd love to hear your story in the comments. There's a quiet you feel after heartbreak, not the silence that comes with loneliness. This one is different. It's the kind that settles over your bones, soft but weighty, like snow you forgot was falling until you wake up buried. That's what those next few weeks felt like. I stopped checking my phone for messages, stopped watching Tyson's school's social media feed, stopped waiting for Marcus to remember that I'm still his mother. I didn't want to be bitter. I truly didn't. But something inside me had cracked open, and I wasn't sure I could patch it up this time. One afternoon, I ran into Eleanor on a walk near the park. She'd just flown in from Florida to visit her daughter and insisted we grab tea at the little cafe off East Main. "You look like you haven't been sleeping," she said, handing me a warm cup and raising an eyebrow. I smiled. "That obvious?" She didn't press, but she's known me long enough to wait for the silence to fill in the blanks. Finally, I told her about the birthday party, the second cake, the post, the $10,000 request, the slow vanishing act. She didn't react the way I expected. No wide-eyed gasp, no rage. Instead, she sipped her tea and said, "You were never disposable, Elaine, but you've been living like you are." That hit hard. She set her cup down gently. "You've been offering yourself up piece by piece for years, hoping it would buy closeness. But love that's bought is never love. It's credit. And eventually, they stop making payments." I sat there blinking at her. The truth of it just sat between us, steaming quietly like the tea on the table. "I don't want to lose Tyson," I whispered. "You won't," she said simply. "Love like yours leaves footprints. He'll follow them back to you one day." That night, I opened the folder I kept in my desk, the one with all the financial records, Harold's investments, my pension statements, the deed from when I sold our home. I sat with it, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I needed to remember who I was before they decided I was just helping. Harold used to say, "You never give from a place of fear. You give from abundance. And if it costs your dignity, it's not a gift, it's a bribe." That man never sugarcoated anything. I took a deep breath and made two decisions. The first was simple. I called the bank the next morning and requested a new credit card, clean, in my name only. No authorized users, no exceptions. The second one took more courage. I asked to set up a custodial account in Tyson's name. "This account," I told the banker, "is for his future, education, medical, whatever he needs, but it's not for his parents to touch. Not 1 cent, not even if they ask nicely." He nodded and helped me fill out the paperwork. I transferred a substantial amount from my savings. That evening, I wrote a letter addressed to Tyson for his 18th birthday. I didn't know if I'd be around by then, but I wanted him to know that I hadn't just disappeared. In that letter, I told him the truth, not the bitter truth. Not the angry kind, but the kind that a grandmother whispers into a child's heart. "You were always worth the fight. Even when I wasn't invited, even when they forgot me, I never forgot you." And then I made myself a small dinner, lit a candle for Harold, and sat by the window in my apartment while the sun slipped behind the trees. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I felt whole. After I set up Tyson's account and canceled the credit card, I expected fallout. I thought there might be a phone call from Marcus, maybe a sharply worded email from Lacey, a doorbell ring, something. But there was nothing. And that was the answer I didn't want, but needed. I had been removed, like an outdated piece of furniture they'd quietly hauled to the curb. And yet, something strange happened. I didn't fall apart. In fact, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Room, not empty space. Room to breathe, to think without being guilted, to eat dinner without checking my phone every 10 minutes, to wake up without wondering if I was still useful. For the first time in months, I cooked for myself. Not for others, not for gratitude, just for the simple pleasure of sautéing onions in a quiet kitchen. I cleaned out the guest closet where I kept Tyson's toys and art supplies. I didn't throw anything away. I'm not made of stone. But I folded it all gently, placed it in a cedar box, and slid it under the bed. I even started attending Wednesday evening story time at the library again. It had been years since I volunteered there. Back when Harold was alive, we used to joke that I had more kids in the reading circle than in my class. The children hadn't changed much. Still squirmy, still curious, still bright-eyed, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't feel like a placeholder anymore. I felt present, solid. One afternoon, as I finished reading Where the Wild Things Are, a little boy tugged at my sleeve. "Are you someone's grandma?" I smiled. "I am." He nodded, satisfied. "You read like a grandma." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. That weekend, I bought myself a new winter coat. It wasn't expensive, nothing flashy, but it was the first time in years I'd bought something for me. Not just for weather or practicality, but because it made me feel visible. And while I was walking out of the store, I passed by the photo printing kiosk and had an idea. At home, I pulled out my phone and printed some of the photos I'd taken with Tyson over the years. At the park, on his 3rd birthday with frosting on his cheeks, holding up a finger to show how many years he'd turned. I clipped them to a string with clothespins and hung them by the kitchen window. Not to show off, not to prove anything, just to remind myself that I had loved well, that I had been there, that even if they tried to rewrite me out of the story, I had the memories, and they mattered. A few weeks later, Eleanor invited me to a small potluck at her daughter's place. Nothing fancy, just casseroles and warm conversation. I almost declined, but something in me whispered, "Go." So I did. And that night, sitting around a table of mostly strangers, one of the younger women asked, "Elaine, do you have kids?" I hesitated. It wasn't the first time I'd been asked since all this started, but it was the first time I didn't feel a lump in my throat. "I do," I said. "I have a son." "Is he local?" "He used to be," I said. "Now we're figuring some things out." She nodded, like she understood without asking. "And grandkids?" "One," I smiled. "Tyson. He's 6, obsessed with dinosaurs and refuses to eat anything green unless it's gummy candy." Everyone laughed. And in that moment, I realized something. Even if my place in their lives had been reduced, it didn't erase who I was. It didn't delete my love. It didn't undo the years of bedtime stories and doctor visits and tiny sneakers I tied on wiggly feet. Those memories lived in me, in him. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find their way back to the surface when he was older. But I couldn't live waiting for that. So I kept going. I baked again, this time for a church fundraiser. My lemon pound cake sold out in 10 minutes. I took long walks. I called Irene on the weekends. I repotted Harold's old philodendron and watched it stretch toward the sunlight. I even started writing a little. Just a few thoughts here and there. Nothing formal. I didn't call it a journal, just notes to myself. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't cried in weeks. Not because I didn't still feel the ache, but because the ache had changed. It was no longer raw and sharp. It had settled into something quieter, a kind of knowing, a kind of peace. I know there are people watching who understand exactly what this feels like. You don't stop being a mother. You don't stop being a grandmother, even when they treat you like a burden, even when they make you feel like a ghost in your own family. You are still here, still breathing, still holding love in your hands, and that love is never wasted, even if it goes unreturned. The first snow arrived early that year. I remember standing by the window in my kitchen, holding my morning coffee, watching the flakes drift down like quiet visitors. The street below was still, the world muffled by the hush only fresh snow can bring. It was the kind of morning Harold would have loved. He always said snow made the world feel honest again, like it covered up the noise long enough for people to see what really mattered. I hadn't spoken to Marcus in nearly 2 months. Not since I canceled the credit card, not since I quietly withdrew the open line of support that had once connected us. The silence hadn't been angry. It had been surgical, like they'd cut me out cleanly and moved on. And in that silence, I'd found something surprising. Myself. I'd grown more settled, not bitter, not numb, just still. I'd found new rhythms, new friends, a community outside of the narrow identity I'd tried to keep inside Marcus's family. But then, on a Wednesday afternoon in early December, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there stood a man I barely recognized at first. Gray coat, face tight, nervous energy in his shoulders. It was Marcus. He looked older somehow, tired. "Hi, Mom." I didn't say anything right away. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly. He walked in and stood in the middle of the room, looking around like everything was unfamiliar. I guess in some ways it was. He cleared his throat. "I didn't come here to argue," he said. I wanted to give you this." He handed me a folded envelope. I opened it and pulled out a drawing. Crayon, messy handwriting, the kind only a 6-year-old could create. A green dinosaur with a heart on its belly. At the top it read, "To Grandma Elaine, I miss your cake. I love you. From Tyson." The edges of the paper were worn, like it had been held and reheld. "He made it for you a few weeks ago," Marcus said. "Lacey didn't want to send it, but I kept thinking about that birthday party, the second one." I looked at him, still silent. "I don't know what we were thinking," he said, eyes flicking toward the window. "I thought money was the easiest way to keep things simple, but it turned you into a transaction, and when you said no, I didn't know what to do with that." I nodded slowly. "We told ourselves we were protecting Tyson," he went on, "but the truth is, you were the one person he always felt safe with. And we took that away from him." There it was. Not an apology exactly, but an acknowledgement, the kind that didn't erase the pain, but gave it a name. "I'm not here to ask for money," he added. "I know that's over, I want him to know you again, however you're willing." I took a breath. Not deep, not dramatic, just enough to carry the words I'd waited months to say. "I never stopped being willing, Marcus," I said. "I just stopped being available for disrespect." He nodded, quietly. His shoulders sank a little. "We'd like to invite you to Christmas," he said. "Tyson keeps asking if you'll come. We won't make it a production. Just family. Simple." I looked at the drawing again, at the clumsy ankylosaurus with too many legs, at the lopsided heart. "Maybe," I said. "We'll see." He smiled then, small, uncertain. That afternoon, after he left, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just pinned the drawing to my refrigerator, next to the printed photos I'd hung in secret months ago. That little dinosaur drawn with 6-year-old fingers was all the apology I needed. Not from Marcus, not from Lacey, from time itself. A quiet nod that said, "You were not forgotten." A week later, I was sitting at the library reading Goodnight Moon to a small circle of children when I saw Tyson, standing just outside the reading room holding Lacey's hand, watching. She gave a small wave. I returned it, equally small. He ran in and sat on the carpet in front of me, cross-legged, wide-eyed. When I finished the story, he clapped and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "That's my grandma. She makes dinosaur cakes." I didn't correct him. I didn't remind anyone that I hadn't made one in a while, that I hadn't been asked, that I'd almost been erased. Because in that moment, I had returned. Not loudly, not with conditions, just quietly, but completely. A message for those of you who've stayed with this story to the end. If you've ever poured your love, time, or money into a family that slowly made you feel like a burden, if you've ever sat quietly in a room full of people you once held in your arms, if you've ever realized with a deep ache that your presence was no longer welcome unless it came with a price, Then this story was written for you. Your worth is not based on what you give. You are not a side character. You are not just helping. You are the root, the foundation, the reason the story ever began. Have you ever experienced a moment like Elaine's, where you finally drew the line not in anger, but in dignity? Please share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching. And always remember, the quietest choices often echo the loudest.